Do you have your daddy?
No.
What happened?
He in the sky.
Your daddy's in the sky?
Yeah.
Who's he with?
God. He won't come back.
What you just heard is the voice of a 5-year-old, heartbroken little girl whose father was killed when she was only 1 year old. Thousands of children each year are forced to live without a parent due to crime, particularly gun violence. It affects not only the children, but the sisters, brothers, fathers, and of course, the mothers. Debra Gillispie, Milwaukee native and founder of Mothers Against Gun Violence, referred to the high crime rate as a public health crisis.
It's a public health crisis because everyday citizens who are not involved in any illegal activity are being affected by gun violence. If the measles was an outbreak, or if the mumps become an outbreak, you see it on the news as a public health crisis. Well, gun violence is a public outbreak. It is definitely a public health crisis, especially when average everyday citizens are being affected by it.
September 24th, 2003, Gillespie's only son was shot and killed.
My son, Kirkpatrick Bickham Jr., and in the beginning, 5 of his friends went to a bar named Alvin Ice House, which no longer exists. I lobbied and closed it down. Went out to celebrate his new job. He landed a managerial position for Corn Rep Incorporated. And this bartender, she was flirting with my son and his friends. And he became jealous. He waited for them to leave, and he gunned 3 of them down. He was arrested later that day, and he's serving 3 consecutive life sentences.
In order to bring the necessary awareness to gun violence, Gillespie said it's essential to humanize the victims and survivors. After the murder of her son, she began tracing the stories of gun violence survivors, which has since turned into a collaborative citywide project with UW-Milwaukee.
My husband and I have date night every Friday night, and we were preparing to leave when on Channel 4 there was this small news piece about this group, Moms Demand Action, was having an event at Sojourner Truth. I said to my husband, please, darling, I just need to just stop by and meet them because that's my topic, gun violence. And I did. I ran in and said what my name was, and I can't stay because tonight is date night, but I promise I'll follow up. Turned out one of the ladies' name was Professor Leslie Harris. I didn't know that at the time, but she and I began to communicate. I told her about my stories, and the next thing I know, she contacted me saying that she'd like to do a project with it and see if she could get it approved. And it was approved. The project is the Gun Violence Project, Narrative of Gun Violence in Milwaukee. And the project is a combination of a multimodal interactive map that will show the stories of the survivors of gun violence, however it comes alive, and you can actually follow their story in real time. In addition to that, the final piece of the project is a documentary on the participants and their stories. God had always led me to start collecting these stories, and it was surprising to me that someone wanted to use them, wanted to turn it into a project. And for me, I think our stories our narratives have often been obfuscated. We've never received dignity in our losses from the media. And for me, this is an opportunity to rectify that. And what was so great was Professor Harris, when she asked me why was I collecting the stories, I shared that thought, and she thought it was a great project. This is the initial project. We're hoping to do it ongoing after this Milwaukee narrative, and we're deciding if we're going to go statewide in Wisconsin, and then after that, maybe nationally. I want them to see the true stories, the humanized version, and see the true loss that these survivors have experienced, as opposed to some negative definition or negative connotations that the media have attached to these stories. These were law-abiding citizens that were victims of gun violence, and they're taxpayers, and this public health issue needs to be addressed. And the only way for legislators or for people to know that is to hear these stories. I think it can help you free some of your burdens by sharing your story. I know that you'd like the opportunity to place your loved ones in a project that, in a sense, helps them live on, that it adds a purpose to their death. And I think people should know that it's not just a black, white, or Hispanic or Latino issue. It is a people issue. It is a public health problem, and we need to address it.
Gillispie said she also hopes to grasp the attention of legislation to enforce and strengthen gun laws in order to ensure responsible gun ownership and ultimately decrease gun violence. Whether you've heard shots fired in your neighborhood, know someone who was hurt, or have been directly affected by gun violence, you are encouraged to share your story and contact Debra Gillispie through the website www.uwm.edu/gun violence project, by email at magv.wi@gmail.com, or by phone at 414-234-9368.